Of you have been following discussions. Press freedom has been top of discussions for this entire week. And it's brought up a lot of questions about where we are as a country. Ghana used to be considered the beacon when it comes to press freedom. Well, this year's rankings from Reporters Without Borders has seen many of us in shock. It has left many of us wondering, where did we go wrong? Well, we'll be discussing that. But first, let's hear from the NMC chairman, Yao Buedu Ayeboafo, because when this came up, one of the main concerns that was raised had to do with how journalists are treated, the lack of safety for journalists, the lack of good remuneration for the environment of media. Let's hear him.
I have not been idle. We have been trying to engage journalists because they are the key people. You know that one of the difficulties that sometimes the commission faces is the fact that when journalists are in trouble, they never think about reporting to the commission. You know, it's a secondary thought. And even in the matter of Caleb Kuda, we had to personally intervene with the management of CTFM before they wrote to so many people who cannot help them, except the politics of it. But they never, called the National Media Commission until we...
In the current democratic dispensation, some believe that their views are being suppressed in a way that contradicts the very position of the Constitution and the very tenets of democracy. From where you sit, do you see that there's some creeping of culture of silence?
I don't know who is suppressing who, because some of the time, when you listen to some of the people saying that they are not allowed to express themselves, and yet they are expressing views, they are sitting on radio stations, they are sitting on TV, and still they say that they are being suppressed, and some of the commentary that they are making. Recently, I listened to a program on a radio station where somebody was saying that Nana Akufo-Addo is a lawyer, but he doesn't understand the law, and that we don't need any referendum for the election of this year. And he was quoting from the Constitution. Meanwhile, there's nothing like that in the Constitution. This ignorant person. What I know from where I sit is that because of the political intolerance in the country, if you speak favorably of the NPP, then NDC people will attack you. If you speak favorably of the NDC, NPP people will attack you. The consequence of this is that there are many good people who are not talking, who know. And so some of the time we have left those who do not know and those who do not understand to be talking rather than listening to the experts, because some of them do not want to be drawn into partisanship.
In remuneration, we still know that in some media houses the salary is nothing good to write home about. What is the National Media Commission doing about this? Because this is an old issue.
The National Media Commission, it can do very little without support from both journalists and those who have invested, because the National Media Commission cannot decree that when you employ people, pay them this or pay them that.
Thank you for staying with us here on the key points. Now, one of the issues raised was why Ghana dropped so much. In the analysis put forward by Reporters Without Borders for Ghana dropping from 30 points in 2021 to 60th ranking, was that they had changed the methodology. And one of the points they raised was that they had reduced some of the criteria. So it had reduced from about 7 to about 5. There were some new items in there, notably the economic context. We scored high on the political context, the legal framework, and we didn't do too well in the economic context. We didn't do too well for security and safety of journalists. And so that kind of brought us down. But let's take a look at what the rankings were for the various countries. So for instance, when we talk about those who improved, you're talking about Denmark, they moved from 4th to 2nd, Estonia from 15th to 4th, Seychelles from 52nd to 13th. That was a significant jump. Namibia from 24th to 18th, Ivory Coast 60th to 37th, Sierra Leone 75th to 46th, and the United States 44th to 42nd. So if you look at, for instance, our immediate neighbors, Ivory Coast, they did better. If you look at those who declined, for instance, you look at the Netherlands, they declined from the 5th to the 28th, Jamaica from 7th to 12th, Switzerland from 10th to 14th, New Zealand 8th to 11th, Burkina Faso 37th to 40th, Ghana 30th to 60th, and India 142nd to 150th. So that's what the numbers look like for some of the countries. Of course, the Nordic countries continue to lead #1. But why are we in this situation? Well, government took a look at those views and indicated that it points to the change in the methodology. As far as government is concerned, in a statement issued by the Information Minister, this should be considered a baseline study for future reports or future rankings instead of being used to compare to previous. Government indicated what it feels is the way forward. So let's have a view of that. And it says it wants to collaborate a bit more with the National Media Commission to deepen the execution of the coordinated mechanism on the safety of journalists, collaborate with stakeholders, including CSOs, to educate both state and non-state actors on the safety of journalists, collaborate with stakeholders to fight against disinformation and fake news, and collaborate with stakeholders to improve on the economics for media practitioners. But government didn't talk about the economics generally of the media space. It talked about improved conditions of work for journalists so that they can work independently. Well, let's turn to our panel who've joined us today. On Zoom, we have Franklin Cudjoe. He is the executive director of the media of the Imani Africa. Franklin, hope you can hear me. Good morning.
Yes, I can hear you very well. Good morning,
Great.
Jifa.
Thank you for making some time for us. And in the studio, we have Suleimana Brahima, Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa. Suleimana, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
And then we have Paul Adum Otre, who is the host of Good Evening Ghana, joining us for the first time on this show. This is the first time I'm hosting you.
Oh, yes, it is.
You've hosted me a number of times on your show.
Thank you very much, Jifa. It's a pleasure.
So nice to have you.
I made a request that has not come, though.
The omelette and co.
The toasted bread. Omelette is for Suleiman. Toasted bread is for me.
So many have been, waiting in great anticipation for this show. So thanks very much for joining us. So first, let me start with Franklin Cudjoe. What are your thoughts about government's response to the Reporters Without Borders press freedom rankings for Ghana? There's been a lot of discussion about why we got here and all that. But first, let's talk about government's response to the rankings.
Well, I think generally the response has been quite positive, I must say. It wasn't particularly arrogant, even though a few of the responses suggested that as if other people were more responsible for our ranking rather than the actions of government agencies. But all in all, I think on the issues of security and the economics of it, I think the government has understood more or less that, look, we need to up our game. And to the extent that it says that it is going to be more collaborative, work with all stakeholders that matter in order to improve the ranking, rather than try to explain away almost all the various factors for which the Ghana was ranked. I think it's conciliatory enough, and I suspect that we need to hold them to their word. So that's what I'll say in terms of the response from government. But I'm sure they were very, very I'm sure the government was surprised, even though it tried to explain away that the methodology had changed. I think there's been some comeuppance and some sort of realization that, look, all the things my good friend Suleiman, the Media Foundation for West Africa and other think tanks have been saying has some merit. And to that extent, the controversy has been put to rest. So we move forward. I suspect that's what they're trying to say.
In looking at the way forward, and I read out what government had indicated is the way forward, it seems to, pardon my saying, simple, saying that we'll collaborate with the National Media Commission. We will work with CSOs to educate state and non-state actors about the safety of journalists. They will work towards the improvement of the economic conditions of journalists. It almost seems like things that we know they have indicated they will do before, and they are repeating it, and it doesn't look like that will work. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I suspect we need to hold them to brutal account this time around. Even though I've said it was more forward-looking, it looks as if the issue around education of people about the security of their work, it sounded a bit condescending because it appears as if people do not know their limits. But somehow that can be taken to mean that, well, on both sides, something ought to be done. I guess, look, I don't think anybody likes to be ranked in the manner that Ghana had been ranked, right? Even as organizations, individual organizations, when you are ranked in certain circles, you definitely would want to come up with reasons for which you were ranked, the way you were ranked, and even then suggest that, look, you're going to improve. To the extent that, for me, having been ranked 30 places lower, I don't think the government will want to sit around and be ranked 30 place again lower than the current ranking. So it behoves on the government appointees to be sure that we do not go further down the ladder. So it has begun, and I suspect this conversation is part of it, that we want to hold them to greater account. I suspect those on the front lines, would be the first to notice if there's been any change. But certainly from where we sit, I remember CDD, Imani, Asila, we put up a statement when we saw the recent increase in the spirit of what I call just intolerance. And we stated that these things were virtually reversing what the criminal libel law sought to undo. I think once we see that there's been a change, we'll come up again and say, okay, we see there's been a change and government's efforts are commendable. That the long and short of this whole thing is that you should listen to actors who are within, because they are closer to the action. And international watchers, observers typically would be listening to them and be reporting from what they say. In the same manner, you also expect that stakeholders in the media front, apart from government, would also be overly or totally responsible. And I must admit that the media has been overwhelmingly responsible. See, if you don't like a reportage, you write a rejoinder, or there's the NMC, and then you report. But as it is, as I said, this is a wake-up call, and we need to hold them to account.
All right.
I don't think it would be in their interest to go further down the ladder.
All right. Let me come to Paul. One of the comments in a speech delivered on World Press Freedom Day at the Press Center, the Deputy Information Minister, and I want to paraphrase what she said, a group of unidentified people beating staff of Radio Ada, or an overzealous policeman, manhandling a media person. These are not the doings of government. That's how she put it in her speech. Franklin refers to a certain kind of intolerance. He refers to the fact that government hasn't been listening internally, and actors externally seem to have validated what's been going on internally. We've seen the response coming from the Ministry of Information through the Honorable Minister Kojo Ponkrumah. What do you make of the response?
Well, I think even before we get to that, there's a historical conflict that we need to look at as we deal with these matters within the context of a developing country. Rules have historically been made for publication hundreds of years ago. Those rules were made against a certain group of people who were the publishers, the journalists. Now, those people who were the publishers of that day, it was a limited number of people who were the publishers of those days. And they go through a certain process to become publishers. So given the process they go through to become publishers and the process they go through to publish, those rules were made. That if you publish this and it's that and it's that and it's that. So when I was, I'm still a reporter, but earlier when I was reporting, I go out and I see people beating people like you're saying at Adan, and I come to the newsroom. I can't publish it. The editor will look at it and ask me that where did it happen, who was there, what happened, and then they may even take the story from me and give it to a senior reporter and say, look, have another look at this story. Now, if I have my phone, I don't need to have gone through that process. I video it and I put it on social media. So Facebook, which is great, and Twitter, which is even greater, have extended and deconstructed the limitation of the people who are able to publish. However, the rules have remained the same. So the rules believe that if you cross this line, you have fallen foul of the law. And the people who were publishing were aware of it. Right now, the people who were publishing has been delimited. So that's going to create a natural problem for countries like us, where we don't have data, information, control of social media, and all of that. So you're going to have a government that's going to be in trouble. And that's why I sort of lean towards what the Deputy Minister is saying. If people publish something, the stream of publication... He
said in his statement that there have been incidences of fake news and stuff that cloud the environment.
When Professor Henrietta Mensah-Bonsu appeared before Parliament's Appointments Committee, she made a point. She said in her day, they said book no lie. So anything that is published, she believes it. Because that is her training. That's the generation she grew up in. You can't do that anymore. The reason why she believed everything was published, everything that was published, was because those people who were publishing go through a certain process. That process has been deconstructed right now.
Okay. So you agree,
are a government...
so you agree with the Deputy Minister. Do you agree with his way forward?
What is his way forward?
His way forward was what I mentioned about working with the NMC, working with civil society to educate state and non-state actors about safety of journalists, working to...
I think, yes, that's that. And I agree with Franklin endorsing that. That's something that we should be doing all the time.
But we all know that the NMC... I question the commitment to the NMC.
The minister's commitment to the NMC.
Yes, because we all know that governments don't resource the National Media Commission effectively. I question the bit about state and non-state actors being educated not to assault journalists when there are elements in government, elements in the governing party who have made pronouncements calling for attack on journalists, which in some instances have led to death, which is still being investigated. Government did not come out to condemn any of those things.
No, I agree with that. I mean, if anybody comes to say a journalist should be arrested, should be beaten, should be killed, yes, I agree with that. But if you're talking about the unfortunate incidents of Ahmed Swale, for instance, which we are still mourning, and which I think right now, the responsibility must really fall on the police as to what has happened. But if you look at the work Ahmed Swale does, and you compare it to the work that somebody like me, I do, my work is essentially domestic. I'm talking about NDC or MPP. I'm not talking about drug trafficking in Dubai or something like that. Now, the kind of excessive work that Ahmed Swale did, it opens him up to an international threat that may occur in Ghana, but that may not have originated from Ghana.
Paul, we can't say that.
No, I'm saying that the kind of work he does.
Yes, but we can't.
Somebody in Afghanistan.
I don't want us to argue the merits of, but in the particular incidents of Ahmed Swale, a report had been.
Oh yes, yes, I understand that.
An MP of high standing had made comments. There is no way we can go outside the borders and be making that reference. So
no, you don't get my point. My point is that more people than Ghanaians may be interested in Ahmed Swale's security. Okay. That's the point I'm making. Okay. Because of the work he does. The work he does is global. It's not limited to Ghana. So there may be somebody in Afghanistan doesn't know me, doesn't care about what I'm saying about NDC and MPP. Ghanaians care about it. But once I'm talking about, I'm doing a good documentary on Al Jazeera, then my security has now become international. I could be attacked in Nigeria. I could be attacked in Togo. I could be attacked in Ghana. You know, these international investigative journalists are really global people. When you're looking for an ass, you have to ask yourself whether he's in town. That's the point I'm making. So that is a very difficult situation, which we think by now the police should have.
Yes, I agree. You said that the police, that remains in the domain
certainly,
of the,
I believe
but
so.
nobody is questioning the pull factors to that. You know, there have been other instances of high-profile people assaulting journalists as well, and they don't even seem to get punished. So,
Yes.
so
I'm
the
sure
question,
you're
so
referring
the
to the case of Kennedy Agyapong.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and even Caleb Kuda. But the point I'm making is the Minister of Information statement, the way for it seems to brush things under the carpet. It doesn't give a commitment to holding members of government accountable. It talks about educating people not to assault journalists. When you have elements in your government who are doing these same things, it doesn't talk about government will hold itself to ensuring that these kinds of things do not. That is what I question. On the issue of the economics for journalists, which government pays journalists apart from GBC? So if you want to improve conditions, then it is for...
Which government,
I'm saying which government pays journalists everywhere? It's
apart
only
from paying GBC staff
apart from
and
paying
Ghana News
GBC and
Agency.
GNA,
Yeah.
exactly. So yes, you may want to improve their conditions, but it's not just about how much you pay journalists. That's why I question the way forward, those 3-4 points raised by the information minister.
I will believe that the information minister will agree with you that when a politician openly threatens a journalist, that must be condemned. I'm not sure anybody will have any other view on that matter. However, my reaction to the report and the economics thing, when I first saw the report, I was very surprised. But when I looked at the criteria, I was excited. I was no longer surprised because this point about the independent mechanisms for media to make money, I've been talking about it forever. That is the beginning and end of independent media in the modern world. Independent media right now is economics. That's fundamental. Without any media you see across the world that you can think of as independent, I will give the example of the relationship between Donald Trump, the former US president, and the CNN over that period and the exchanges they had. The reason why CNN was able to survive that situation in America is that they have an independent way of generating their own money, a way that is developed by mechanisms, technical mechanisms that have been available in America for a long time. I've attended many digital migration conferences, and the real reason for the Americans insisting that this must happen all over the world globally is towards independent media. That's the fundamental thing. But in Ghana, over the last 5 years, the conversation about media independence has never included economic independence, being able to generate your own resources. So when I saw that, I was terribly excited that, oh, finally, we now have this criteria, and it is the reason for why Ghana is looking bad. But Ghana will certainly look bad if you are using the economics criteria. And I was gratified that it's not so much about security and other criteria, but it's fundamentally about economics. I was a bit concerned that the early analysis of the report did not talk about that. The early analysis of the report went straight to the means that journalists are being hounded, they are being arrested and all of that. And I asked myself, when I listened to Jana Penton, who is a former boss of the National Media Commission, who said that we should now develop our own index at the National Media Commission, our own index within our context so that we can deal with it. So this economics matter, I think from now onwards, should lead the conversation. How do we, what are the mechanisms between the National Media Commission, the National Communication Authority, the Ministry of Information? What mechanisms?
And the Ministry of Communications.
Yes, and the Ministry of Communication, yes. What mechanisms should we apply to be able to give independent media the voice? I've been screaming about this morning.
So let me
make the point.
We'll come to talk about that in detail. I just wanted your preliminary
my mother is
comments.
watching. She wants me to make the point. This morning.
Your mother?
Yeah, she's watching. This morning, because she was telling me that so yeah, it's fine. this morning, people are watching you on television, and they are watching you for free. It will not happen in England. It doesn't happen in America, except you are the state. In fact, America, it doesn't happen at all. In England, if you are the state broadcaster, it happens. So
it happens, but people pay TV license fees.
Yes, so the state broadcaster gets that.
Yes.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, you are still paying somehow.
What we have been doing at the NCA is that develop a box, a decoder for Ghanaian television. On that decoder, give an option of pay TV. TV3 can decide that our program key points is so good that we want it on the pay channel. NCA will look at it, there's a criteria to determine which one can come on the pay channel, so it comes. So people who watch TV3 this morning will see you start the program at 7 a.m. They will see an announcement that if you want to continue to watch this program with Jifa and Suleiman Brahma and Paul, move to this channel. That channel, you're going to pay 5 cedis to see it. If and until we are able to achieve that, and it has been achieved in all those places in the world where we admire their television. So when you walk out of this studio this morning and your program is good and people like it, you may have ended up with 1 million cedis on Saturday morning. TV3 continues to build up its programs for the pay channel. By the end of today, they may have made 5 million cedis. That's the independence that you need. That's what you need. So in England, when I worked a little bit for the BBC, they don't even travel with officials. Sky News flies their private jets with their reporters to the European Union conference. That's independence. They don't even travel with them.
Okay, so
we have to travel with them.
Let's put a pause there.
No, we have to travel with them, don't we? We have to travel with Vice President. We have to travel with John Mahama. But if TV3 could have his own helicopter and say, Jifa, we hear President Akufo-Addo is going to Apiati. We are going with him. The helicopter takes off and is branded TV3. When you arrive there, what's the information minister going to tell you? In fact, you can decide to ignore him.
Okay, so let's hold on.
So that's to be the conversation.
Okay, so we'll come
onwards.
back to that conversation because it's an important one. I also have a few issues there that I would like us to address. Suleiman Ibrahim, let's come to you now. So obviously, a lot of the things you predicted came to pass for this Press Freedom Index. What do you feel about the government's response? Is that an adequate response, or the government needs to come again?
Well, thank you, Jifa. First of all, I have said that the conclusion in the government's statement, as far as steps that will be taken to help address the challenge are concerned, are welcome. Talking about working with the National Media Commission, working with non-state actors, civil society, and so on to help improve the conditions of safety of journalists and press freedom generally in our country are developments that I would say would be welcome. However, there are a number of things that are said in there. For example, when mentioned, it is said that the relationship between the government and the NMC would be to help strengthen the coordinated mechanism on safety of journalists in Ghana. It is put as though we do have one. I think one of the problems in our country is that politically we talk a lot, but we do far little. Over the last 3 years, for example, we've heard several times the coordinated mechanism on safety of journalists, which has been put in place. In fact, the government's statement in response to the ranking indicates that one of the reasons why perhaps we didn't even go further down the line is because of the coordinated mechanism on safety of journalists. And I'm saying that there is nothing like that currently as we speak. There is nothing like coordinated mechanism on safety of journalists. It's been talk and talk and talk. We haven't done it. But you know, on every public platform, we talk about it as if we have one. I also would have wished to see the government making an open acknowledgement about its own failures over the years, and therefore the steps that are going to be taken to ensure that conditions for press freedom in our country is improved. Having said that, I think there was a lot of emphasis on the economy, and that is where we scored our lowest point, and that really is part of the reasons why we dropped to the 60th.
I think we scored 47
Yes, we scored.
points.
Is it percentages though?
40%.
Is it
47
percentages? Those figures, are they
points.
percentages?
I'll just say points.
No, so they are.
Are they over 100?
Yes, they are over
Okay,
100.
so,
Yeah, so percentages.
So
Yes,
percentages.
they are
okay.
over 100. Now, if I see, to start with, in Africa we were number 10, and out of the
Down
10,
from number 1.
down from number 3. So apart from South Africa, in the top 10, apart from South Africa, the rest of the countries that were ahead of us are countries that are far smaller in terms of economy. And the media industry in every economy, every country, is supported by the economy that it has. So when Paul talks about the US and how vibrant the media there have been and all of that, it is also because they have an economy that is the biggest in the world. Indeed, if the economic indicators were going to be what would really bolster the position or the ranking of a country, then perhaps US would have been number 1, because that's the biggest economy in the world. Now, but if you look at the ranking, look at the country that is ahead of US, Burkina Faso. Are we saying that the Burkina Faso or the Burkinabe economy is such that it's able to support the media industry there than we have here in Ghana?
No, I know why. I can answer the Burkina Faso question.
Paul was talking about digital migration as perhaps the solution. Look, one of the critical things that we have done over the years has been on the digital migration front. And last year also, I wrote a piece on why Ghana is delaying and so on and so forth. Again, if digital migration was the solution, Kenya perhaps would have been #1 in Africa, because when the International Telecommunications Union agreed that countries should migrate and gave a deadline in 2015, Kenya was one of the countries that was able to meet that deadline. We are still struggling to be able to implement. But look at where Kenya is on the ranking. Kenya is 69th, even though they did their digital migration that Paul is talking about way back in 2015.
No, nobody has done it. No.
I'm telling you that Kenya has fully migrated. And
We have migrated too.
I'm saying they fully migrated.
Okay, Paul, let him make his point. You will make your point to come.
Fully migrated in 2015, met the ITU deadline. And therefore, for anyone to say that if we had fully migrated, the context would have been different, begs the question. Again, if you look at the economic indicators in the ranking, they had 3 pillars there. The first pillar is economic constraints linked to governmental policies. So they are looking at what economic constraints are there that are linked to governmental policies. The second point is economic constraints linked to non-state actors in terms of advertising and commercial interest. And the third is economic constraints that are linked to media owners seeking to promote or defend business interest. These are the 3 indicators that they looked at in terms of scoring countries on the economic front. Now, if you take a country like the Gambia, which is ahead of us, the Gambia has a GDP of 1.9 billion. The total media advertising budget available in the Gambia, both online, offline, is around $260,000. Yet, during COVID-19, the government of the Gambia decided, well, the media is struggling and they are playing a critical role for our efforts to deal with COVID-19. And what did the government do? It made available 270,000 euros in 2020 available to the media, to support the media to be able to do their work, and to also aid the media because of the challenges that they were going through for lack of advertising, because the industries that support advertising were all struggling, just as it was everywhere. A country that has a GDP of 1.9 billion, a media advertising spend of about 250,000, they were able to make that money available to support or to cushion the media. If you take a country like Sierra Leone, which has moved from 75th to 46th, the government of Julius Maada Bio took deliberate and conscious steps and made it clear that, look, media brutalities are not things that will be tolerated, and repealed criminal libel law. We had done it way back, repealed criminal libel law. In July 2021, we did a statement in which we were commending the government of Sierra Leone for the steps that were being taken to promote media freedom. In fact, only 2 weeks ago, under the auspices of the government, an international media sustainability conference was convened in Sierra Leone to help discuss how the media in Sierra Leone can be supported to be sustainable. This was by the government in collaboration with private actors. This is what the report is looking at when they are talking about the economy. What steps are government taking? Because if it were just the open economy, look, Ghana, our GDP is over 60 billion. Total media advertising revenue to Ghana is about $226 million a year. If you do the analysis, online, offline, this is the budget that is available to media advertising. Where does it go? So in analyzing the economic context, it talks about, on Ghana, government advertising is awarded through non-transparent and inequitable process. This is about Ghana. And then you ask yourself, whilst the system, the economy is struggling and all of that, what steps has the government taken to support
But Sule, we can't be sure about that for a fact because there are research agencies that do media research. It gives you the rankings of radio and TV stations. It may not be as accurate as one would want. There are not as many of those researchers as one would want in a bid to validate what one person has done against what 2 or 3 others have done. But I know that some of that forms the basis on which government and even commercial entities would put their money in one media house or another.
Yes, indeed. And look, I think that what we have to also agree is that this ranking was not just on Ghana. It's not as though they do for Ghana and this year they came and said, oh, Ghana, you've dropped from 30th to 60th. This is ranking that is done annually on 180 countries. The factors that apply to us apply to all other countries. They use the same marking scheme, if I may put it that way, for all countries. So if you drop, and then you begin to say, oh, it's because they changed the marking scheme.
No, I think we've moved on from that conversation about...
I haven't.
Okay, you'll come to that. But
so,
I think we've moved on from that in the sense that there's a lot of focus on the 2 key issues where we scored low, which is the safety of journalists and then the economics. Because maybe now that you are telling us what other countries are doing, governments may be so minded to realize that there are things that need to be done. Paul, I'll come to you. I've been keeping Franklin on. Final point from you, Sule.
And better appreciate what Sule is saying.
So, Jifa, look, I have indicated there are a number of countries that scored low on the economy, just as we did, and yet are ahead of us.
Okay, so we just need to wake up.
So when we say, oh, we did well on the political front, on the legal front, on the socio-economic front, and so on and so forth, that is true. But how well did you do? Because if somebody is scoring 92%, 90%, and so on, and then we do, let's say, 70%, and we say we are doing so well, we are competing against certain indicators. It's not as though it's like you alone and you go and say, well, I scored 70%, so I've passed.
Okay.
If somebody is scoring 92 and you are doing 70, to what extent can you say you are doing well? Yes, you are doing well, but how well are you doing in relation to those points?
Okay.
I wish we would have time
to
go into the other factors for me which are so critical.
So let me let Paul come in. Paul, quickly do your rebuttal, then I have to come to Franklin.
It's not a rebuttal. I just want to better appreciate what Suleiman is saying. Media plurality is something that I didn't see. I don't know whether it's an essential part of it. Because if you are talking about a developing country and you are talking about a nascent democracy, media plurality should come up very, very high. The countries he talks about, and I'll come to the America, Kenya, all the examples he gave, Burkina Faso, having a good spend on media. I don't think Burkina Faso has media plurality. So if you're looking at Burkina Faso today, you are comparing it to Ghana maybe 1995, where you have the state broadcaster.
That's absolutely false.
I
think you should get your facts right. Burkina is one of the most pluralistic societies when it comes to media.
How many radio stations do they have?
How many?
Radio stations.
Burkina has almost close as many as we do have. But remember, Burkina has about 7 million population.
Yes, I know.
We have 30 million.
Yeah, how many
so if we have 400,
have?
500 radio stations and they have 200, 300.
Do they have 200 radio stations in Burkina?
Yes.
Okay, 200 radio stations.
They have more.
And more than 200?
Yes, they would have more.
No, I just want to deal with the data. So more than 200.
Yes, but I think you should know when you begin to relate to those things.
Yes. So you are saying that the Burkina Faso government spending on the 200 media stations, according to the research, was better than Ghana's spending on the media. That's how we ended up that way.
No, I doubt if you were listening.
Okay.
I was talking about country's GDP.
Yes.
The total media budget, media ad spend. So when I say that Ghana's total media ad spend
no,
is
we're talking about governments to the media, isn't it?
Hold on.
The media ad is a different conversation.
Yes.
The advertising budget is a different conversation. The first point you made was how much government is committing.
I talked about Gambia, which committed almost $300,000 to the media directly to support the media. And yet they have a GDP of 1.9 billion.
So we are talking about government's commitment.
No, so Paul, so your point is what?
So my point is that if you take Burkina Faso and you compare it to Ghana in terms of government spending, you might not be doing a good comparison because of the extent of our plurality and the extent of their plurality. They may be smaller in terms of being able to deal with their state broadcaster and others. Ours is quite broad and quite big. And so if you're looking at how much direct money is coming from government to media, you might find it better in Burkina Faso. In fact, if you look at Ghana in, say, 1995 with the same criteria, and you're looking at direct spending from Ghana to government to media, you might find it appreciable.
But is it not true,
But-
Mr. Adu?
But
Is
I've
it
not
not true?
finished. I'll
No,
come-
but is
I'll
it
do
not
that.
true, Paul, that certain media houses get certain advertising because of their ownership? These are
Yes.
owned by politically exposed persons,
Yes.
and so they have an advantage.
Well, I
Isn't
don't-
it not
I'm
true
not-
that sometimes when
I'm not sure
governments
about
are
that. So let's look at-
no, when
let's-
governments are unhappy with certain media houses, they deny them advertising.
Oh yes, that
Exactly.
that stands
So-
to reason.
so-
But then hold on. If you look at the government advertising spend today in Ghana, it will not look awkward if you compare it to the media buying agency's report. So if the media buying agency's report has Media General as number 1 and multimedia as number 2, if you compare to government spending, I bet you see the same ranking. You see that a lot of government spending on, say, government advertising on COVID, government advertising on Independence Day celebration, government advertising is going more to the list that the media buying agencies have produced as the TV or radio with the highest number of years and the highest number of eyeballs. You will see that. So,
Okay, but that's just one example. There are other examples
he
of.
mentioned other things. He talked about the Burkina Faso and the Gambia
So that's,
example.
that's one
about
example.
Government spending, yeah.
So that's one example. That's government spending.
That's government spending. So,
But if you talk about countries that invest directly, like the COVID example, where they directed monies to media houses, we didn't have much of that in Ghana, save for maybe advertising. But lots of media houses suffered during COVID. Salaries in some instances were probably cut or people were let go.
well, I don't know the data on that, but I
Yes,
see
there's
that.
no specific
yeah,
data on
I've
that.
not seen the data on that. But in media was one of the industries that was not affected by COVID. That was actually helped by COVID. Media and technology.
Digital media.
Yeah, media
not
and technology.
traditional.
Yeah, because people had to, the Ministry of Education had spent significant amount of money on media houses, including Media General, to teach children at home. Yes, they did that. Have we forgotten? The Ministry of Education transferred the classrooms of several districts across the country into the production centers of media houses. So Ghana Television at a certain time was teaching science.
Okay, but you
Yes,
see, Paul,
John
the
FM
po-
at
the
a certain
point
time
is-
was teaching something.
So the point
if that
is-
is not
so see-
government spending on media, I'm not
Yes,
so sure
but the
what it
point is there's an imbalance. There might be that. But then lots of media houses lose money through their advertising because other companies, their advertising budget has been cut due to the impact of
Yes,
COVID.
but
They
you
don't
see-
have money to spend.
I see media, and I keep saying this, I see media as a football team. You are selling. People must want to see it. If people don't want to see it, and for that reason they are not patronizing your channel, do we want government to pay for that?
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just letting you know that the reality is that there are imbalances.
But I can
in-
tell you
in
that
the
during
space.
COVID, the budget, the revenue of media houses in Ghana, within the context of COVID, those good media houses was appreciated.
Which do you refer to as?
Oh, look at
Okay.
the list of the top
Okay,
media
so let
houses.
me turn to Franklin.
But
Kujo now.
he hasn't mentioned that he didn't remember that Ministry of Education did a lot of
Okay,
spending.
so you've made that point. Let me
media
turn
houses.
to Franklin now. So, Franklin, there's the debate about what the indicators were where we didn't
talk about
perform
Kenya
well.
and
So, fine, we
American
performed
whites.
relatively well for 3. The other 2, the economics, Paul has kind of launched a bit more into that. But the question is, much as there are issues of the economy, does that mean we should ignore the issues of safety? The safety office that was set up to be managed by the National Media Commission, I detailed a reporter there about a month and a half ago. We didn't get anybody to speak to. You know, we didn't get anyone to engage with on particular issues about how many people had come to report, whether the office was actually working. It's almost as if it's a white elephant. So there are issues about we must still address the safety issues and then address the economic issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think these two issues are very paramount, and I would think that the issue of the economics, much as it's narrowed, I suspect that the word plurality, forgive my mispronunciation, also means that the equal access to, if you like, whatever the government wants to give in terms of advertisements and whatever what have you. So I think the plurality argument can also be made in that particular within that particular space as well. But I also think that the economics argument helps a lot when Paul makes a point about the productivity of each media house being able to generate content that sells. It looks to me that one of the low points for Ghanaian media is the lack of, if you like, investment in innovative, productive documentary. And one of the things I think I haven't seen pretty much. I can understand that it's still pretty much free to air, but you see, you attract a lot of eyeballs as well. I must admit there are a few media houses that do quite well, but generally it's leaning a bit towards too much sensationalism, and issues that are discussed are mostly surfaced and not necessarily investment into deeper subjects. For instance, I'm talking about having dedicated journalism or journalists to very critical issues around the world. And we seem not to have those whole lot. We do have a few investigative journalists, but again, they are not quite widespread when it comes to developmental issues. I suspect one of the things the fourth estate wants to change, because I've seen their latest survey, which asks people questions about what they want to see more. And I obviously lean towards seeing more developmental issues, having a lot of focus there. And that can also lend to creating the spaces for generating revenue. I mean, the whole argument about having government access to government spend makes it a bit too sectarian for me. I think the media has to diverse its ability to generate resources and attract the eyeballs that would bring that resource to bear. But on the issue of security, I seriously think there's a lot ought to be done. It doesn't take too many cases for us to be blacklisted. And more so, it is what we do with the few cases that actually matter. So in the instances of Kalapuda and the Swalis of this world, we haven't seen pretty much change. And I think that uh, that's where we need to work a lot more on. To the extent that the government says they will educate people about about their security or safety. As I said, smacks of a certain sense that maybe media practitioners do not know the extent to which they have to comply with certain security standards or safety standards. I would think that in this case, it applies more to agents of government, and the government cannot lay claim, cannot say that its agents, the actions of its agents are not its own. So a lot more ought to be done on that front. But I must also say that journalists must also be less provocative in that regard as well. So it cut both ways, but certainly I think on the economics of it, I like to see a bit more vigor on the part of the media.
In terms of government doing a bit more, there are questions even about that commitment. Because if politicians, for instance, own media houses and they allow people to denigrate others, it means that once no one holds any of those people to account, it allows the public to do so. I dare say, even you, myself, Paul, Sule, we've all been victims of abuse and intolerance in one form or the other. But the reality is, when politicians own media houses that do this to others, that denigrate people, when colleagues denigrate others, it allows the general public to do same.
Well, I think what happens in that case, again, because we have a democracy that says that if somebody defames you or denigrates you, you resort to the law court. I'll be worried if the law courts do not actually serve that purpose. But I understand where you're coming from. I mean, when politicians become larger than life, uh, the judicial process takes much longer, and it's not everybody who would have access to the court. So it is incumbent on the government, and I suspect that the entities that have been established to seek redress, the NMC, as we are now saying that the NMC is not well resourced, uh, I think that's where we are laying the blame at the doorsteps of the government, and not necessarily government telling people, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. I think the institution, in this case, NMC, must be up and doing. But I must admit, if government appointees or government agents or people, politically exposed persons, do these things, and they must be taken to task. I can understand a reprimand from the government would work, but I think generally the institutions that have been established must up their game. And I suspect the failing of that has fed into the ranking as well. And I must admit, the ranking is a general one, and I think picking portions and debating over them serves a good purpose. It means that we are waking up to the reality that the rankings may have changed. But certainly we should start thinking about we checking boxes that matter in the next ranking so that we would have seen to be doing quite well. I think next year we should be discussing how appreciable we have become of the various indices or the various factors that led to the index. And then maybe Ghana would have done or gone several steps higher on the ladder. But as it is now, it's important we take the report in its entirety and then begin to work. I would think the government should, again, the areas they want to work with journalists to improve on must be put in action immediately.
All right. Thank you very much, Franklin. Let's take some text messages. This one from Shaibu from Tamale reads, Jifa, the change methodology saw some countries improve. Those countries that improved did that through their institutions. None of the way forward is new. This one from Kojo in Tema. This new criteria was used for all other countries involved. Yet those hitherto who were behind us are now doing better than us. We should simply admit that we've become worse off on all fronts, including the press index. Musa Abatwa from Kumasi writes, I essentially disagree with the NMC chairman who sought to blame journalists for the current Akufo-Addo government's inability to do better in relation to the media. We've witnessed countless attacks on journalists who criticize government, to some extent threatening their lives, and no indicator has ever been, and no leader has been subjected to. Okay, so this reads badly after this. So sorry about that, Musa Abatwa. You were making a good point from the beginning. This one from Sule says, the NMC chairman should ask himself why the journalists and the media houses have deserted the commission. The commission has to up their game and not behave like another entity of government. Kweku from La Paz. Good morning, Jifa. We should stop giving poor excuses for the performance of government regarding press freedom. We were all in this country and saw how brutally the government has dealt with journalists. This one from Aaron from Latebiokoshi. The media is the strongest tools that can make and unmake you. Press freedom is enshrined within our legal framework and must be allowed to prevail without any internal or external difficulties from any political force. And this one has no name. It says, I disagree with Paul's solution to fixing the economic issue with the media. News is a public good, and paying to access it in a developing country like Ghana will deprive a huge segment of our population of access, which will affect participation in governance. In rural Ghana, journalists serve as a link between the flow of information between the state and its people, and that's from Hashmin. And Ernest writes, it's a shame that Ghana has been ranked so poorly. It's a wake-up call for Ghana to improve its image into the next index. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Paul and Sule and Franklin. Thank you very much for staying with us here on The Key Points, and thank you for your messages. You can send us some more. You can also tweet at us on Facebook and tweet at us on Twitter. Send us your message on Facebook. I'll read them. Let me just read some from Twitter because some of them are criticizing me. And the essence of media freedoms is that we must be tolerant. This one says, Jifa, please stop interjecting Paul, allow him to flow. You are interjecting him too much. This one says, Jifa, please allow Paul to follow. Your interjections are too many. This one from Papa J Jr. says, we need to discuss very serious matters of this country and the way forward. This one says, Mr. Sule is really handling Mr. Paul well. Proper analysis by Mr. Sule. And this one says, Paul, you are defending too much. Please look at the issues clearly. That's from Masaudu. Thank you very much for your message. They say I shouldn't interject you, but I'm sure I will. So go ahead.
Suleiman, I'm trying to appreciate the Burkina Faso point you made.
Are we still going back to Burkina? Paul, we don't have
we pulled out data that is wrong. He brought out data that is wrong, so I need to correct that.
So what?
He said Burkina Faso has more than 200 radio stations. So people are sending me that. It's not true. If you look at the BBC site, Burkina Faso has 150 TV and radio stations.
Combined.
They have, yes, combined. They have 21 TV stations, of which 6 of these TV stations are religious. So religious-based, yes. Now, if you look at Burkina Faso, I do not think that in terms of plurality...
Who are they quoting?
BBC, this is BBC. I've sent it to you, first. BBC. So this is a BBC site. I can send it to you.
Okay.
Or you can read it.
Look, to clarify that,
you can read
and the BBC will refer to RSF. Am I right?
Who is RSF?
Reporters Without Borders.
They did. So I can read it. Yeah, I can read it. Burkina Faso has around 150.
Okay, so hold on. Allow him to make
I think it's important to clarify that for you.
Yes, please.
Look, I work in Burkina.
Yes.
We are Media Foundation for West Africa.
Correct.
Let me read RSF, what they put out on Ghana for this year.
Is BBC wrong?
No.
If they're wrong, I'll defer to you. If the BBC is wrong, I'll defer to you. Is it wrong?
Hold on. They are referencing RSF, isn't it? Reporters Without Borders. This is what Reporters Without Borders say about Ghana.
Listen,
hold on. It says, and this is 2022, thanks to the 1992 Constitution authorizing new media outlets to launch without license, at least 100 media outlets operate in Ghana.
100. So it means their numbers are inaccurate.
RSF is talking about 100 media houses in Ghana.
Operate?
100 media outlets operate in Ghana, including radio stations, television networks, and internet sites. This is RSF. This is the reference that you are citing. They are talking about 100. Are we having 100 Ghana?
I don't get the point.
So the point he's trying to make is that the numbers may not be entirely
accurate. I am telling you that I work in Burkina.
Yeah, but they're saying 100 stations operate in Ghana.
Yes.
Operate. Yes. That's different from license.
But Paul, you and I know there are more than 100. Come on.
What are you saying?
Operate.
TV, the numbers that operate.
Yes.
So
radio, the numbers that operate.
So there are
online,
42,
the numbers that operate.
No, it's not online. The BBC is clear. If you're telling me that the BBC is wrong, it's fair enough. That's your area.
Okay.
But this is BBC.
Okay, please, I need to...
area.
Yeah, but I have to trust the BBC. Are you suggesting I shouldn't trust?
But you're not trusting Media Foundation. They work in Burkina. They work in the entire West African.
So there are two different sets of data.
So there are two
different sets of data. The BBC has its data, and then he's quoting
400 radio stations.
Yeah, he's quoting. We have 400 licensed radio stations. Are they operating?
Who? In Ghana?
Yes.
Paul, I'm surprised. I'm surprised because you served on the NCA.
But that's why I am able to say what I'm saying. Because NCA has consistently gone around stations where they don't operate. They only come at election time, do 1 or 2 programs, and NCA has been looking at these things.
According to the NCA's data, we have licensed over 600 radio stations.
How many are operating?
And those that are operating, as at the last time I saw, it's over 300.
Those that are operating at the last time you saw, was it an election period?
Not election period.
Okay, so you are saying that the BBC's data is wrong.
So yes, they are wrong because what he's saying
that's all
is
I want. That's
the
all I
numbers
want
are
him
not
to say.
accurate. Okay.
Yes, the BBC's
so please,
data. If the BBC's data is wrong, fair enough.
There was something else.
Okay, so I need to come to you.
100.
No, this is BBC quoting, and you say it's wrong. Fair enough.
Okay, so now Paul, let's come to
the BBC should correct their data then.
Okay, so Paul, let me just come to you.
And I was talking about media pluralism in Burkina Faso and
no, I don't want to talk about Burkina anymore. Let's talk about Ghana.
So let's talk about Gambia.
Ghana. Let's talk about Ghana.
You can't have a radio station that runs a program opposed to the philosophy of the government. Since Blaise Compaoré, you can't have that in Burkina, but you have that in Ghana. If it's NDC is in power, you have radio stations that are dedicated to the MPP.
You're still talking about Burkina Faso.
Yeah, because we have to deal with
data
that we can rely on.
I don't have a view of Burkina, so I don't want to address that.
No, you said the BBC is wrong. That's fine.
But the point is, the pluralism...
I've never heard BBC being wrong on information on their website, but this is the first time I'm hearing
They are referencing what they probably have collected. I have no way of verifying that, so let me move on.
Yeah, please.
So now the issue...
I would like to trust the BBC.
So there's an issue I do want to raise on the economics
No, I trust the BBC more. I need to make that point.
I want to address
Yes,
the
very
issues
much
of
so,
the
very, very
economics.
much so.
So now you talked about improving the digital space, improving access for people. There was one text message who said that news is a public good.
Correct,
People
correct.
should not pay for it.
Correct.
Then there's beyond that.
Yeah,
the
there's something to say about that.
Yes.
And I agree with that news should not be paid for. And in the whole policy discussion, there's something called the public service broadcaster. The total digital migration process is to convert Ghana Broadcasting Corporation into a public service broadcaster that broadcasts free. And the TV license will be collected from everyone and given to the public service broadcaster to generate public service oriented content. So that's there. News is not going to be for sale. But for the other things we do, news commentary, news analysis, all the programs we do, entertainment, sports, and all that, I believe that is a market. Okay. And so if you are collapsing, you have to look at your programming again.
Okay, but you see,
it's not a government issue.
That's one aspect of the economics. The other aspect is one of the reasons why we score low on this is if you shut down media houses for 3 years, 4 years, you deny them the ability to earn a living, to pay people. There are people who were employed in some of these media houses who probably never got jobs because of some of the media houses
because they were shut down.
They worked for. Their equipment, deteriorates. If you reinstate them, they have to reinvest. All of that affects the economics of the media.
I agree with that.
If you have a spectrum and you reduce it and keep reducing it to give out more licenses, you affect the economics of the media. Those are the various issues I wanted to raise with you, not just that one bit about the digital.
I think I agree with you on that if you shut down a radio station for 3 years, you're definitely creating an unemployment situation and you are degenerating the industry.
And the investment.
But we have to understand also that radio operates in a regulated situation because it's a privilege. And it is that privilege that Facebook has deconstructed that I started with, which is something we should look at. So banking operates in a regulated industry. Import licenses operates in a regulated industry. In that regulation, there are rules that people must obey. So if you obtain a radio license or you obtain a TV license, there are rules that you must obey. It may well be that in the past, the regulatory organizations have not put in place the checks and balances the way they should because, and there's a reason for that, it's not entirely a bad thing. We came from a history. You see, history always informs what we do. We came from a history where we have been starved with expression, media plurality. So when we started, there was a big debate in the early times when I started being a reporter with Peter Ajete and co, who were debating whether we should allow a wholesale expression of media or we should regulate it. People like Dr. Bedasama, who was Attorney General, were of the view that if we don't regulate this thing, because we think that people think they are coming back at the PNDC, and we don't regulate it, we'll grow later to bite our fingers. Martin Amido and others were all part of this conversation. The other side of the conversation, at that time, which was the National Media Commission, Peter Ajete, representing the Bar Association, was on the Media Commission at that time. They felt that, look, where we are, let us open it up. It is better to have expressive media than to have a controlled media in the circumstances where we are going into a constitution for the fourth time at that time in our 30, 40-year independence history. So that's what we did, and that's what has come to bite us. We can correct it, but there's no problem with us opening up the media space as we did, and I agree with that. The group of people thought, let's open it up as far as we can. 20 years' time, we can come back and close it. Let's not say we are restricting it, because if we restrict it, we can't trust the PNDC to be able to keep the restrictions within that. So we've gone past that.
We've gone past
So because
that.
we went past that, regulations and licensing obligations were not particularly looked at so that we can enhance democracy. That's what we did, which was good. Right now, we've come to the situation where after 30 years, our democracy is sufficiently enhanced. It is time to look at these regulatory matters because it may destroy our society.
Okay, so
if a radio station is closed down...
So it's true, regulatory matters matter, and I don't say that the NCA or any regulatory body should not do that. But you see, it is because of those actions, that is why we have slumped. So we need to see policy that enhances.
The policy must be transparent. It must be applied equally to all. But it is unfortunate for us to slump because we are applying the rules. That's unfortunate.
No, you apply the rules, but it becomes a harsh punishment.
Well, but if banks are closed down, banks have been closed down based on the rules. Some of them are in court. other regulated oil sector industries. Every now and then, people's licenses are being taken in the oil sector because of regulatory issues. Media is also regulated. So if every now and then licenses are taken out away from media people, and that means that our rankings must come down without a thorough investigation of the process, to say, for instance, there was no transparency, to say, for instance, it was arbitrary, to say, for instance, that the rules were not correctly applied, and that the court said this or the court said that. These processes of the NCA closing down radio stations had gone through court processes. No less a judge than Professor Dateban had presided over these matters. He had made rulings. There had been meetings in parliamentary subcommittees, and discussions have been had. The issue about whether the NCA was right or wrong is no longer an issue. The NCA was right in applying the rules the way they did. That was the opinion of Professor Dateba in most of those things. And the document is there. I'm sure that Suleiman knows. So if our rankings should go down because there's a radio station called Metro TV, Metro Radio, and they are not obeying the rules, and they are shut down, and that means our rankings must go down because it reflects as a radio station has been shut down. That's mob rule. That is mob rule.
Okay. Let me come to Sule. Yes.
Well, Jifa, I think that the question on pluralism has been addressed. Now, on the question of regulation and the shutdown of media outlets,
which obviously impacts our ranking.
Yes, and I agree that as a country, we don't make laws just for them to be in the books. We make laws for them to be enforced. And so no institution should be blamed if they seek to enforce the law. But when the law is being enforced politically in a discriminatory manner, that is where the problem is. And indeed, for many of us, that is where the problem with the NCA's decision is, in terms of the politically discriminatory manner in which the shutdown of radio stations were done. And we have always said the evidence is there. And I can show it to you if this is NCA data. This is not me, National Communications Authority. This is their data as at fourth quarter 2020. Now, fourth quarter 2020, the closure of radio stations were done in 2019. And they said that they had done so for stations that had failed to renew their frequency authorization. Now, so Radio Gold and the many others were shut down. Then we have always confronted them to say, look, the frequency authorization has to be renewed every 5 years. In fact, that was one of the reasons why a station like XYZ was shut down, because XYZ got its authorization in 2011. So by 2016, they ought to have renewed the authorization, which they had not done. And so when the NCA was making the decision, they closed them down. So that's enforcing the law. Now, you look at the same NCA data. This is Oman FM. They got their frequency authorization in 2006. When did they last renew? Nothing. And yet, Oman FM, look at the status on air. So how do you say this is about enforcing the law, if it's about applying the law to some and not applying it to others? How do you justify that? When we confronted the NCA,
a one-sided story.
Hold on.
Let him finish his point. Then you can.
When we confronted the NCA and provided the evidence that, look, what you did, there are clear indications that from your own data, a number of media houses are there that committed the same infractions and yet were not punished. Why so? What did they do? They changed the database. This time round, they don't provide the date on which the stations got their first authorization and when they renewed. This was what led us to go to court against the NCA, that provide the data on when each radio station got its frequency authorization and when it last renewed.
Why didn't you make a presentation to the court on this? That is the tribunal that was looking into this matter on the shutdown.
Communication Services
No,
Tribunal.
you see,
that's their work.
Why didn't you make a presentation
The
to
court's
them?
proceedings had happened before we started going into this. And in fact, when the Minister for Communication and Digitalization appeared in Parliament for her vetting, these were the matters that, she was confronted with. And a presentation was done. Why didn't you shut down radio A, B, C, D, E, F, which had also committed the same infraction of not renewing their frequency authorization, and yet these others were shut down? The minister said she was going to look into it and will get the NCA to investigate. So Paul shouldn't sit here.
And what happened after that?
And you see,
we've not heard anything.
Paul at that time was on the NCA board.
Yes, I very
the
much
board
was.
that made these decisions. Paul was part of it.
Yes, I was.
And so you should know
No,
very
I don't
well.
agree with what you're saying.
Why
It's a
don't you
one-sided
agree? I'm
story.
saying this
You
is
said
the
the matter is
data.
in court. What did the court say?
Which court?
You just said that you went to court on this matter, didn't you? Just
We
say
went
that?
to court to ask the NCA to give us the data.
To compel the NCA to give you the information.
Yes, and the NCA's response.
You didn't have the freedom of
You were
information
there.
at the time.
Hold on. The commission
have
was
the
not
freedom
in
of
place.
information at the
It
time. Okay,
was
commission
there.
was not in place.
The
yeah.
NCA's
So you sued the
response
NCA to give the information.
to
What did
give
the court
the
say?
data to us.
Did the court ask the NCA to do that?
The court asked the NCA to do that.
Yes.
The NCA in its response, why we went to court was that, well, the data we were asking for them to be able to give it to us,
needed to pay for
they
it.
Would, they would have to do a lot of research to be able to find the data. And people will have to commit time to do that research,
So
for
pay
which
for it.
reason we must pay. And we said, well, we're coming on the background of the RTI law.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay, but I think you had made you made all
I
this,
think
but
the point he
but
makes,
I think
the point he makes
but the point
that
is, Paul,
the discriminatory application of the law.
discriminatory application
that's
of the law.
important. I'm fidelity
No,
to the
I've
law.
given you
So
the
the
data.
discriminatory application to the law should not be allowed. There's no problem about that.
But that is what
However,
you did.
that is not the reason why application of the law should be seen as reducing our rankings. So
Okay,
that
but-
in reducing the rankings, they should have stated clearly that it's not the application of the law, it's a discriminatory application of the law. So, for instance, 5
Okay.
radio stations find themselves in this situation.
But that is
2
why
are
they
shut down, 3 are not shut
make
down.
the point in their
The report,
text in the report about the ownership of some of these radio and TV or media houses, which they estimate 30% are owned by politically exposed or connected persons or
yeah, I see
politicians.
that.
And it's I dare say it could be more.
Okay,
and,
so the
and
point,
that
the point being
feeds
made
into
is that
this.
the point being made, if we broaden it, is that because Oman FM is owned by Kennedy Japan and he's a member of the MPP in Parliament, he was favoured in the
Coincidentally,
application
he was the chairman of the Communications Committee as well.
as Parliament. So he was
Yes.
favoured in the application of the law. That's the point being
it's
made.
not just-
yeah,
it's
so
not
that's
just
a valid
that. There are
point.
several of
However,
them.
if you look at it within the political context, so he represents MPP, therefore he was favoured. Joe Osei-Usu, who is the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, and I was on the NCA board, so I know this. His radio station was shut down. He's the Deputy Speaker, first Deputy Speaker of
What's the
Parliament.
name of that
His
radio
radio station, I got it for you. His radio station was shut down. We've made this point. NCA has communicated this so many times in terms of addressing the discrimination. There were also NDC stations that have not been shut down, that were not shut down, that are still broadcasting.
even though they infringed on the law?
No, I'm not saying they infringe on the law.
But if they didn't, why would you shut them
I'm
down?
shifting it from the application of the regulation, the discriminatory
Okay, so
application
you
of
need
the
to make that
regulation.
point quickly. I
I'm
need
broadening
to
it
come
up to the political context, because the reason why the discriminatory application of the law is important is that we are looking at it within a political context. Because this person has a certain political color, you didn't shut him down.
Yes.
So I'm spreading it out beyond the regulatory regime and coming to the political context, which is that there were political radio stations against the government's philosophy that were allowed to operate, or that are still operating.
Even though they infringed
Okay,
on the
but the
law?
point
Because if they
is,
didn't,
but you
why
see,
would
Paul,
shut
within
them?
the
at the end of the day,
point. I've
Paul,
shifted from
Paul,
regulatory to political
but
context
Paul,
discussion. I
At the
think
end
you're
of
not
the day,
following me on
the
that.
point is that there was a certain discriminatory process.
No, I don't.
All of this,
until and unless we have a final conclusion on the research that he's embarked on, which is a very noble research, we can't say that.
It's not research, it's
So
your
let
own
me
data.
let me
Yeah, but
turn
you have to
to
research to find the data.
Okay, so
We don't-
gentlemen,
this
thank you.
matter is
I
not
think the point
conclusive.
has been made. Let me
The
turn to
discriminatory is not
Franklin
I can give it to you.
Kujo
No,
now.
we are done.
No,
So
this data.
Franklin,
Yes, but
what
we
are
have
your
to find
final
it
thoughts
conclusively.
on
So we have to
what
get
the
the
look
NCA
ahead will be? Because the question is, this year we've already seen some journalists caught up within the law. The government started applying the law through the police. People who were making comments that are deemed defamatory, they were taken to court. Some were even jailed for contempt and all that. What would be the look ahead? Because then it doesn't look like we may improve on our current rankings.
Well, I think immediately those cases that was initiated through the court ought to be discontinued, and the persons allowed their freedom. I think that would be the first noble steps to take. Second, I think this conversation about the apportioning blame here and there and then the defense is natural. I think we need to have that. It strengthens, or it goes to the extent of the plurality that we seek. Everybody must have his or her say. But at the end of the day, it must be towards one goal: improving our ranking, our position on the ranking. I think it's very, very much important. Now that we know that irrespective of the methodology, countries are ranked, And if there's the new information about the methodology, we only need to go back and work and improve upon on our ranking. That's all I've got to say. Otherwise, we'll be going in circles. Really, I think a lot has been said. If we want to compare developed countries to developing countries, I think, as Sule said, these countries were all ranked based on the same criteria. I think we only need to look at it and see how best we can make improve on the ranking. It's the same thing we used to do when Ghana was ranked, was not favorably ranked on the World Bank Doing Business Index. I mean, the government set up
Okay, I think we are losing Franklin on his network there. So I think we'll thank you very much, Franklin. I think your point has been well made. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost you on the network, but many thanks for making some time for us on the key points. Much appreciated. So, Sule, let me come to you. I'll come to you, Paul. Let me speak with Sule. Let me come to Sule first. I'll come to you. So, Sule, is there any light at the end of the tunnel looking ahead to the next rankings? Because we've already seen significant infractions this year. So I dare say that we may not be doing as well. Maybe we will not be 60th next year if we take deliberate steps to improve. But I don't know if we'll still get back to the 30th position. What do you think we should do? Franklin made a point about a committee was set up to look into improving the ease of doing business in Ghana. And since then, I think we've seen some improvement. Should we do same for Ghana, for our media?
Well, I think that the starting point is for government to acknowledge that things are not going well as far as media freedom is concerned, and stop the denial and trying to find excuses and so on and so forth. Like, look, from the regulatory point of view, we were talking a while ago about the closure of radio stations. If you look at Seychelles Island, which is a small island of 115 or 150 archipelagos, they were #1 in Africa this year, on the 13th position. One of the things that happened was that since 2012, they had cut down the cost of establishing or getting frequency authorization by, what you had to pay was about 1/8 of what it used to be. Now, when the shutdown happened, we saw some radio stations that by law were required to pay as much as 60 million Ghana cedis in order to be able to get back on air. Of course, at that point, the indication was that, well, it's the law that is being applied. Apart from that, the incidents around the issue of brutalities and all of that, it's not just individuals. Of course, there are at times that non-state actors act. But when the police beat up journalists, that's a state actor. When national security storm modern Ghana offices and arrest journalists, blindfold them and take them away, that's a state actor. If the if military officers beat up journalists, they are state actors. They are not non-state actors. If national security storms City FM, City TV, pick up journalists, brutalize them, or at Accra FM, the police is deployed, get there, in a Rambo style, pick up a journalist, that is a state actor acting. It's not a non-state actor. And so where our Honorable Deputy Minister talks about when
these are not the doing of government.
So, yes. And some of the things, look, Bobie answer. Before the police action, I had written an article to condemn his actions and the fact that what he was doing wasn't professional and so on and so forth. But there are mechanisms in a democracy for dealing with that. Ultimately, after the police action, which created all the euphoria and the news and so on and so forth, what happened? They took him to the National Media Commission, and the commission ruled that what he did was unprofessional and they needed to apologize. If that could be done, why do you deploy the police to go and act the way they did in the first place? The incidents are quite numerous in terms of the safety things. Look, I have said the President Akufo-Addo regime has applied the law on publication of false news more than any other government since President Kufuor. Meanwhile, President Akufo-Addo was one person who condemned the application of that particular law during the Mills era. And in fact, he stated emphatically that as far as he was concerned, the law on publication of false news was unconstitutional. Is it therefore not surprising that when he becomes president, then you see the rampant application of that particular piece of legislation? So as I said, the starting point is for all of us to agree. And I'm not happy where we are. I feel proud when I travel and people take my passport and, oh, you're from Ghana. Wow, that's a great country, and so on and so forth. I am not happy that we've dropped this low. But as I said, while we are dropping, others are performing better. All along, it's been Namibia, Cape Verde, Ghana, or Ghana, Cape Verde, Namibia, or Cape Verde, Namibia. That has always been the trend. But today, even a country like Burkina Faso, which is being ruled by military officers, is ahead of Ghana at 41st, and we are at 60th. The same methodology was applied, and yet look at where we are on the 10th. I'm not happy about it. We are based here in Ghana, even though we work across West Africa. We cannot say that we are achieving so much when where we are based is doing worse. People called me from Namibia and said, oh, look, West African countries are dominating in terms of the top most countries in Africa. So Cape Verde is there, Niger is there, Burkina Faso is there, Ivory Coast is there, Sierra Leone is there, and Ghana is here. And I said, well, but where we are, we always say, because we are here, Ghana is doing so well. So I'm not happy that we are where we are. Okay. But the good point is, the starting point, let us all acknowledge, let us come together. Look, if you ask the Minister for Information, he will tell you. About 2 weeks ago, I called him and I said, oh, what can we do about the coordinated mechanism on safety of journalists? I spoke to the NMC. This was before this thing came up. So the commitment is there to work together to improve our conditions. I'm not happy when a journalist is beaten. I'm not happy when our country is ranked low. But if we don't accept that, look, let's work together and rebuild, and then continue with, oh, it's the methodology, oh, it's the economy, oh, this, I don't think that we would ever get there. Okay. And next year we may even get worse. All right, thank you very much. Paul, you're up.
My final comments. Okay, so I think that there are two things we need to look at. I'm getting a lot of quick. Okay, very quick. First of all, a Jana Penton solution, I think, is the first solution. To develop our own index within our context, because really and truly...
Why do we want to develop another index when there is one that has been trusted for the last 2 decades? Let me explain to you why.
Because if you tell me today...
It's like we were not happy with Fitch and Moody's. We said, let's develop an Africa-centered index.
Because we have to understand what goes into these international things. I understand that. It can be different, okay? You don't always have to trust the things you see. If you tell me today that operating as a journalist, when I wake up in the morning, I work for Radio Gold, MPPC, or I work for XYZ, or I'm a Gumbe, whatever his name is, my friend who was unfortunately went to prison.
You are a good evening Ghana.
Yes.
Use your own.
I'm Gumbe. No, I am considered a friend of President Akufo-Addo, which I am. So it's not a good example. So we look at a Radio Gold person.
Even that demonstrates... If a Radio
Gold person wakes up this morning and he's going to work, and you tell me that he fears for his profession more than somebody who is in Burkina Faso, that suggests to me that I must develop my own index. Burkina Faso is a military junta that is doing all sorts of things. So,
Paul, are you saying that?
Tell me today, Paul, are you
rejecting
Faso,
all the challenges that many journalists have raised? Are you rejecting the use of law to harangue journalists?
I have had text messages that the police asked me to publish on people threatening my life, giving details about me.
Even the criticism is that if we as journalists denigrate our colleagues, speak badly of them, and not critique them in a fair, balanced manner, we are allowing same to be done to us. All of this has been going on. You are saying that we should develop a separate index. Let's look inward.
That index that we develop must contain all that. It must contain the threats that I received that the police said publish. I did. In 2004, I went to cover NDC Congress at Jakarta.
Yes, you were assaulted.
I was beaten.
And that should not have happened.
That was 2004. So yes, we have to develop our index that contains these things. Our index that will say that because he spoke on an Akan radio station, they beat him more, or because you're speaking English, they beat him more. You remember the Ifya Pokwa incident? The people attacked her just because she spoke in English. Now, that context is very indigenous and is original to us.
Okay,
so when we develop our index, we will be able to put in those contexts that really give us the real feel, not something esoteric that looks like, is it really possible? You are telling me that Burkina Faso journalists are freer than Ghanaian journalists. Okay, so how is that? Anybody who has studied sociology will tell you that's not possible.
So the point,
that index that says
Burkina
Faso is better than Ghana must be questioned.
Are you dismissing all
can't
the
dismiss.
issues.
I appreciate the work that they are
have been-
doing.
Not him.
Yeah, but
The
he's part of it.
No,
Yeah.
but there are complaints from journalists.
Those complaints
about
must be reduced into our own. So, for instance,
So
I'm
you
driving to work.
want to believe them after you've done an index?
No.
Is that what you are saying?
Jana Pinton said that we should develop our own
No,
index.
so that's
that has
separate.
all-
I think you've made an argument
Yes,
for that.
yes, so that's
But
one. The second thing is to do the economics thing and be able to have the media so well paying that we're able to attract a certain category of the young people. Because if you go out there to their countries, those who colonized us, they treat media as a top class job. In England, you must have gone to Oxford or Cambridge to be an editor. That's what it is. Here in Ghana, they don't do that. We do that for medicine. We do that for law. You go to the university or to the tertiary institutions, the top ones go to medicine, the other ones go to law. We don't have the top ones coming into journalism, which I think is more important for the establishment of the country, the development of our democracy than medicine and law. Journalism is more important. Why do we leave journalism to the level where it's so low paying that people don't want to come in when they are good? You and I have been in this profession. You are an example. You left the profession. We're all crying. If TV3 had not had the presence of mind that we need Jifa back into this thing, you would have gone. You wouldn't have been sitting here today. The people I practice journalism with, they are all gone. In 2014
Okay, no, you need to wrap up because we are done.
I was the only journalist when we met to the British High Commission who had covered elections from 2000 and was still there. Everybody is gone.
Okay.
That's the crux of the matter.
So we should do
Let's
the economics. Okay,
and
so
attract young people who are great to come in. When
All
they
right.
come in, because of their attitude and aptitude, the
Okay,
practice
so we
will be
need
better.
to need to go
And
now.
we did our
yes,
own
Sule,
index.
you want to make a quick
Yes,
point?
30
I have to
seconds.
allow you quickly.
First of all, 2018, when we were #1 in Africa, we all celebrated. Nobody talked about developing our own index. I'm not saying that doing so is bad. Why is it that when we are 10th in Africa and 60th, this whole conversation about developing our own index?
Because the outcome says Burkina
Let
Faso
him
is better,
finish.
and we can't accept that.
The second point that I want to make is that on the numbers, you know, as I said, whilst the RSF is talking about 100, I just wanted to let Paul know that according to the NCA's own data, 2021, we had 488 radio stations operational, not licensed.
Okay.
Close to 700 licensed, but 488. And yet in the report, they talk about just 100.
Who talks about just 100?
I think I pointed that to you a while ago.
Are you
that
still talking about the
RSF
BBC thing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
You know, and so...
No, I'm saying that I
think-
trust the BBC. You said I shouldn't trust them. That's
We
okay.
didn't say you shouldn't trust them. You
I'm
just need to
just
be
giving
critical
you the
of the
evidence.
data.
You know, I'm
Okay,
just
so
giving you the
gentlemen,
evidence.
thank
So,
you very much. Much appreciated. And it's been a hot show. Many thanks to Franklin Kujo as well for joining us. I'm Jifa Bampo. We'll be right back with another panel taking a look at some of the issues raised in John Mahama's lecture earlier this week.